We always need inspiration. We always need a chizuk. Every time in the year, we need a chizuk. When I came to Gates Yeshiva 40 years ago, and right now, today, second day of Elul's man, there was a shmooze from Rabbi Gurvitz, Zechron Levrocha. And I was sure, shmooze at the beginning of Elul, what we're going to hear about, tshuva, avodas amidas. This is what Elul is all about. And Rabbi gave a shmooze, and he said over from the grace of Mashkiach Rabbi Yerucham. He said then what he had heard 60 years previously from Rabbi Yerucham in the Meir. We're talking now about 100 years ago. And Rabbi Yerucham said, Ascholas Elul, what's the avodah of Elul? What do we need to work on and focus on during Chodesh Elul? I was sure he was going to say we should learn Musa twice in the day, Achos Chaim L'Rosh after Shachris, some sort of takon of Musa. Hat der Mashkiach Rabbi Yerucham gesagt, the avodah of Elul is leyageya machshava be'iyun v'chidush, to work harder, to put in more effort, to concentrate more, to stretch yourself more. Be'iyun, learning things more be'iyun, v'chidush, and to be mechadish things in Torah. This is the avodah Elul. In the lexicon, in the dictionary, in the concept of the grace of Mashkiach Rabbi Yerucham. I would like to explain perhaps what this means. As a Chon for Yom Adin, we know we're blowing shofar for 40 days now. We're remembering the 40 days that Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai, and each one of those days they blew the shofar. It was the third time Moshe Rabbeinu went up, and he managed to clinch the deal. By the time he was finished, we got a kapara, salachti kidvarecha, and the new luchos, and Kabbalah Satira a second time in Kippur. That's well known. And in order not to make a mistake about when Moshe Rabbeinu is going to come down, so the blew shofar for 40 days, and therefore we have 40 days of Rachman. Great. What did Moshe Rabbeinu do for those 40 days? So the Rishonim tell us very clearly that just like the first 40 days Moshe Rabbeinu learned Torah in Shemayim, so too before bringing the second luchos, Moshe Rabbeinu learned Torah in Shemayim. If we see that at the end of these 40 days Moshe Rabbeinu clinches the deal and he comes down with a kapara on the new luchos, this shas rachamim, this eis rotzen, came about due to the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was learning in Shemayim all these 40 days. And he relearned Kol HaTorah Kula. Hence, if we want to emulate, and we want to have a shaychus, we want to tap in to the school of these special days, then we've got to follow Moshe Rabbeinu's lead. What did he do for these 40 days? Leyageya machshava be'iyun v'chidush. Reb Moshe in his Sefer Dorash, Moshe and Parashat Kisisa asks, Meir, Moshe Rabbeinu had to go up again to get the second luchos. Meir, he had to daven. But to learn Kol HaTorah Kula for 40 days, he already learned Kol HaTorah Kula for 40 days before he got the first luchos. Why do you need to learn again? Another 40 days of Limud Torah. Says Reb Moshe, you can't compare the original Limud Torah before the first luchos to the new Kabbalah Torah of the second luchos. It's a new derech halimud. In our language, I understood the Gemara once according to Rashi. Now there's a new mahalach according to Tosfos. There's a mahalach of luchos rishonos and there's a mahalach of luchos shnius. And like it takes 40 days for luchos rishonos, it takes another 40 days of luchos shnius. Ke'en divrei Reb Moshe, says the Chazanish in Chaim Kuf Chav Hei Ois Beis. Ke'en zeh, in a much more Hasidish oifen, says the Shem Shmuel in Parashas Kisisa. Tzad HaShovesh HaBekulam. These 40 days is a man of Rachamim, and these 40 days is a day when Moshe Rabbeinu was exercising exactly this nekuda, leyagea machshava be'iyun v'chidush. We know from the Arizal that this man of Elul, there's various different Rosh Tevos for Elul. And another one, Ichbadati Esliboy Veslev Avodov, Esliboy Veslev Avodov is Rosh Tevos of Elul. Says the Chidah, Ichbadati Esliboy Veslev Avodov. You arrive in Elul, sometimes our heart for the last 11 months has been in a situation, or different times has been in a situation of Ichbadati Esliboy Veslev Avodov. Comes an Elul and its opportunity, Leman Shisi. It's a time when you can put Torah back into the person and get a new Eis Rotzen and come down with Salachti Kidvarecha. The Arizal says another remez. A Yid Nebuch killed B'Shoigeg. And there's a Goyal Adam running after him, after his blood, wants to kill him. V'samti lecha mokom asher yonos shoma. I will make for you Ori Mikra where you can run away. Rosh Tevos, V'samti lecha mokom asher yonos shoma. Rosh Tevos is Elul. Elul is an opportunity to run away into Ori Mikra and escape from all those who are running after you, all the Makatragim. What does it mean running away? Where do you run away to? Says the Tana Debeli Yo in Perek Hey, Avi'ani Amelech Chadorov. A person's in danger. Ra Adam Sheisurim Boy Nolov. He knows that there might be a cheshbon or Shoshani Yom Kippur, Achmon Litzlan. What's he going to do about it? Says the Pasuk Avi'ani Amelech. You want to run away to the protection of the king Chadorov into his room. Where is the room of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? That's the Heilige Torah, says the Tana Debeli Yo. You want to be safe. You want to prepare for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Join a Shia. Come and listen to another Shia. Work on a Shia. Copy Moshe Rabbeinu. Yagea Machshava Be'iyun V'chidush. This is our Abbot in the 40 days lead up to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We say on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Tshuva, Tfilo, Tzedakah, Mavir, Nezroya, Gzeira. Says in Aibishitz and Yaris Tavash, there's no point coming on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur and shouting Tshuva, Tfilo, Tzedakah if you didn't prepare with Talmud Torah. Torah is the ultimate protection, and Torah is the base of Tshuva and Tefillah and Tzedakah. And of course we need Tshuva and Tefillah and Tzedakah. And of course that's the avoid of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. But you want to be Zoicha to get to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. You need the Limud HaTorah, the extra effort. Exert yourself more in Chodesh Elul. Take on another Shia. Work harder to be Mechadish something. That's the avodah. The whole day of Yom Kippur is built on begging HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Zechus of the Yud Gimel Midas Sharach. Hashem, Hashem, Keil, Racham, V'chanun, till you come to the complete mercy, V'nakeh. That's the pinnacle of the Yud Gimel Midas. Says the Targum, V'nakeh, L'tayvin la'iraisa, those who learn Torah. Says the Vilna Gaon, you want to be Zeicha, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should have Rachmanos on us in the Zechus of the Yud Gimel Midas of Rachmim. V'nakeh l'tayvin la'iraisa. Chaparein, learn more Torah in Chodesh Elul. Meir v'Rabosai. We say on Rosh Hashanah, we pour out our hearts to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we quote the Navi, Habein Yakir li Ephraim. Please, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, feel towards me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should have a relationship with us like we are His beloved, precious children. Im Yelet Shashurim, the most beloved child in the world. Kimidei Dabri boy, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu will talk about each one of us on Rosh Hashanah, Zocher es Krenoi, it should remember us for good. It says the Chofetz Chaim, how can each one of us arrange, orchestrate that we should be included in the Ben Yakir Li Ephraim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should look at us, Im Kebanim Rachmeinu Kerachim Mavalbonim. How are we Zeicha to that? The Pasuk says Mufurish, B'ni Im Tikach Amorai Lecho. Says Shlomo HaMelech, you want to become a son of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Im Tikach Amorai, take my holy words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Use the opportunity in Elul. Chaparein, every opportunity. Leyageya machshava be'iyun v'chidush nocha iyun nocha chidush. Then you will be b'ni im tikach hamorai. Then you come on Rosh Hashanah and you say, Im kebonim rachmenu kerachem ov albonim ovinu ov arachamo. Loi lechinam. That the Kotzke before Tkiyas Shaifa sat and learned Shvera Sugya be'iyun v'chidush. Loi lechinam that the Divrei Chaim said Chodesh Elul, that the Abbot of Chodesh Elul is Chaparein of Sugya Monili B'yodcha. These are people, these are Gdolim who understood that this is the richtige achona for a Shana and Yom Kippur. May the Rebbeinu Shem bench each one of us an extra effort in Chodesh Elul, and we should be zeicha together be'iyun v'chidush, and be zeicha each one of us to aksiva v'chasim b'toivim. Meir Rabbi say, the inyanim of Inoy and Kippur, we try to learn the sugya together. Ad mokim shi'adinu magav, try to understand the machloeks in the Rishonim, the Achronim, and for zeicha a little bit of halacha l'maisa oich. B'chol ha'Torah kula, the isurim of the Torah, macholas asuras, not allowed to eat chaza, you're not allowed to eat anything else, macholas asuras. Whenever it says achile, the Torah shiuri b'kazais. So the Gemara in Yuma, to be chayav koros for eating on Yom Kippur is not Torah on a kazais. Kesevas. Kesevas is the shear of a date, and it's bigger than a kazais. Why is it different than all the other isurim in the Torah? Says the Gemara, Alamol in the Torah says achila. Yom Kippur, the Torah chose a different language. Kikol nefesh asher lo yis'una. A person who doesn't afflict himself. Says the Gemara, affliction, in as much as it refers to achila, is what's called in the Gemara yisuvei daita. A volume of food, which is yisuvei daita, makes the person feel calm, satiated, yisuvei daita. How much food does a person need to eat for yisuvei daita? Because kazayis is not enough. Kazayis is called achila, but it doesn't make yisuvei daita. You're only chayav koros in Yom Kippur if you ate enough to make yisuvei daita. The chsiv v'inise mesnachik. Mamufurish Gemara. So far, it's so good. The Chasam Sofer learns from this Gemara that this goes in the reverse as well. The Gemara says yisuvei daita makes a kula. If a person ate a kazayis of chaza, he's already chayiv malchus. A kazayis in Kippur is not yet chayiv, because the Torah says v'inisa is yisuvei daita, which is a shiva kesef. What happens is the Chasam Sofer. The Gemara says in Chulin in Daf Kuf Chav, a fellow is eating chaza. He ate a half a kazayis of chaza, sicked it up, threw it out, and he ate the same thing a second time. But through his mouth and his palate went a whole kazayis of food. Says the Gemara is chayiv malchus for eating chaza. He ate a whole kazayis. What's the difference that it went in and came out? Says the Chasam Sofer, Chaim Kuf Chav Zayin, that only applies to shar machlos. Ashein kein Yom Kippur, the Torah says you're chayiv for yisuvei daita. Yisuvei daita means when you get into your stomach a shear of a kesef. Says the Chasam Sofer, same way the Gemara says you're not chayiv yet until you eat a kesefes. Who then if you ate a kesefes, but the kesefes is made of half a kesefes, and you threw it up, and another half a kesefes, you're again not chayiv, because in your stomach you don't have a shear of a yisuvei daita. That's the Chasam Sofer. So far, so good. Zok the Shagas Arya, Chol HaTorah Kula, you take food, chaza, you mix into it something which tastes vile, something terrible taste, and because of this, a person doesn't enjoy eating, wouldn't normally eat this. He's not chayiv mishum achila. He is b'chayiv mishum achila. Says the Shagas Arya, And yois that Yom Kippur, the Torah says, Yisu v'daita, kol ha'nefesh asher lo yisa'una, v'yinistim es nafshei seicher. If you got a kiseves of food into your stomach, then you managed to do a Yisu v'daita. If you made a Yisu v'daita, says the Shagzariah, even though it was made up of food which is mixed with a davar mar, and it's not called an achila, but you're chayav koros of Yom Kippur because you created a situation of Yisu v'daita. So here we have the Shagzariah being mechayav because of a Yisu v'daita without an achila. The Gemara says even though you had an achila, you're not chayav in Yom Kippur until you got a Yisu v'daita. The same thing the Chasam Sofer. You ate a half exercise and another half exercise, you still don't yet have a Yisu v'daita. Shagzariah takes it a step further. If you created a Yisu v'daita, al yedei davar mar, al yedei taruvs of davar mar, you're chayav in Yom Kippur. You don't need an achila at all. That's the Shagzariah. But in the Sefer Torah HaYeledes has a discussion. We know that there's different shiurim for machal and amashke, in general isurim, and on Yom Kippur also. Michael has a shiur of Kisitzeves Hagasa, like we discussed, and Mashke has a different shiur. And there's halachic definition of what's called a Michael and what's called a Mashke. And the Torah HaYeledes discusses, let us say, for instance, you make a nice food. So technically it's really a mashke, but you artificially made it into a solid. Now, how do we judge the shiur? To be chayav in kol ha'Torah kula, is this treated as a meichel or mashke? And huadin, what's the din on Yom Kippur? How do we treat it as a meichel or as a mashke? Now, if you come in and have a person who's got to eat pochas mekashir, and the pochas mekashir of a meichel and a mashke are two different pochas mekashirs, what's the din of ice cream? Do I in the poskim discussion what's the din of eggs and various other things which are not clear whether they are treated as a meichel or as a mashke. So the Torah HaYeledes says a chiddush that if halachically something is called a mashke, then in kol ha'Torah kula the shiur to be chayav is shiur of a mashke. Mashein in Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a din in Yisu v'daita. How much food makes a Yisu v'daita? How much drink makes a Yisu v'daita? Says the Torah HaYeledes, if this thing is intrinsically a liquid, but I artificially made it into a solid, it might be that in Hilchos general macholas asuras it'll be treated as a meichel, but in Hilchos Yom Kippur it's Torah Yisu v'daita. If you made a Yisu v'daita because you had enough and it's really a mashke or it's really a machel, then you'll be chayav in the dinim of Yom Kippur. So far, everything is good. Now comes Reb Chaim Meir in Achiezer. And Reb Chaim Meir discusses a fellow put a tube through his mouth, through his throat, all the way down into his stomach. And into this pipe, he put food. He stuffed it into the pipe. It makes its own way down. It doesn't touch his throat, his epiglottis. It goes all the way down the pipe. It arrives in his stomach. In kol ha'Torah kula, if he put chaza into this tube, he won't be chayav. Because if you make a noas me'of of chaza, but not a noas goren, you didn't go through your mouth and your throat because it was going through a pipe, you're not chayav. You're not allowed to eat chaza. It's not called an achila. It's a noas me'of without a noas goren. Lich oira, according to the Shagzariah. The Shagzariah says that on Yom Kippur we don't care whether there's an achila or not an achila. All that we're concerned for on Yom Kippur is, did you make Yisu v'daita or not? The same way that the Shagzariah says with the davar mar, which is not called an achila, but you got it into your stomach. You made Yisu v'daita. You're chayav on Yom Kippur. So it stands to reason according to the Shagzariah. If you put the food through a tube and you got it into your stomach, and it's a whole kiseves, you'll be chayav on Yom Kippur. Reb Chaim Meir says a chiddush, almost his own gzeres hakosov. The Gemara says in Yuma, how do we know? The Torah says v'nisim is nafshei sech. And inum, how do you know inui means to refrain from achida, that sort of yisuvidaita. Maybe in our language we would say, some other ano going into a nice cool room on a hot day, some other ano that gives people ano smelling nice things on Yom Kippur. How do you know to define what's called the inui? Says the Gemara, we learn from Apostle. It says over here, afflict yourself. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the man, the Pasuk says, Vayancha, Vayarivecha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu afflicted you by not giving you food, making you hungry. So you see that until they got the man and they had no food, the Torah describes it as a situation of Vayancha. If so, says the Gemara, the Ve'inisim is not in the Torah language is talking about an inu from lack of food. Very good. That's the Gemara and Rashi in Ein Hermabis. Says Rabbi Chaim Moiser, what does it say in this pasuk? Vaya'ancha, Kadosh Baruch Hu afflicted you, made you hungry. Vayarivecha, you were hungry, and then Vaya'achilcha es hamon, Hashem fed you the mon in the middle. Says Rabbi Chaim Moiser, when the Gemara learns that Ve'inisem es nafshei seichem is to be understood in the context of the pasuk, which says Vayancha vayarivecha, the Gemara also means to include the continuation of the pasuk. Vayancha, he afflicted you. Vayarivecha, he made you hungry because you didn't have food. Vayachilcha, and he fed you the man. So you see that Vayachilcha, says Rabbi Chaim Moiser, is part of the description of Ve'inisim es nafshei seichem. Therefore, says Rabbi Chaim Moiser, the Gemara says that if you made an achin on Yom Kippur, that's not enough. You ate a kazai is not enough. You need to eat a whole kisefes, because the Torah also says vayancho v'yinisem yisuvidaita. But there also has to be an achila, because you learn from the pasuk vayachilcha sama chidush of Rabbi Chaim Moiser. Therefore, says Rabbi Chaim Moiser, if you push the food through the pipe and it got into your stomach, although you managed the yisuvidaita, but you won't be chayav koros on Yom Kippur. Why not? Because you didn't do an achila. It stands to reason, according to Rabbi Chaim Moiser, he'll argue on the Shagas area as well. You mixed it with the Dovel Mar, and Achanam, you got the food into your stomach, but you need an achila. By achil chazamah. It would seem to be a machlekes Rabbi Chaim Moiser and the Shagas area. Let's leave that for a minute. Let us continue. There's a Yid who is unfortunately in danger. And he knows that on Yom Kippur he's going to have to eat. He'll be Pikuach Nefesh, a situation of Pikuach Nefesh. And if he comes to the Rav on Yom Kippur, the Rav is going to tell him, you have to eat. A whole kisefes you have to eat. Okay. Now, according to Rabbi Chaim Moiser, if he orchestrates a pipe before Yom Kippur, puts it into his mouth, down his throat, he goes to the doctor, he should please put this into him before Yom Kippur. If he then eats on Yom Kippur, he hasn't done an Issav Chorus, because Rabbi Chaim Moiser says that Yom Kippur only over if there was an Achila as well as the Inui. So maybe according to Rabbi Chaim Moiser's kula, that he's not chayav, maybe it creates a chumrah, that the person is obligated before Yom Kippur to go to the doctor to install such a tube so that on Yom Kippur you shouldn't have to be over on an Issa Deraisa with a het of Pikuach Nefesh. But Rav Moshe writes in Igros Moshe and Chelik Gimel and again in Chelik Dalet that no, person is not mechuyev min haTorah to worry before Yom Kippur and create a situation that he won't need to fall back on the head of Pikuach Nefesh on Yom Kippur. What's the raya? Says Rav Moshe. Santa raya. The Gemara learns from Apostle. Meir about Erev, but we learn that the Torah made a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. Why? Whether it's in order you should be able to fast well on Yom Kippur. It's not the reason. The Torah made a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. According to many Rishonim, it's the Raisa. Frank Rav Moshe, Why do you need the Torah to give me a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur? I should be mechuyev to eat on Erev Yom Kippur anyway. The Torah says I'm mechuyev to fast on Yom Kippur, and it's not shy for a person to fast for 2 days. So min ha'hechach, the Yom Kippur itself obligates me to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. Why need a possible to make a mitzvah of eating on Erev Yom Kippur? Elamai, that a person is not mechuyev before Yom Kippur to create a situation that he shouldn't need to fall back onto a het of the Pikuach Nefesh on Yom Kippur. So far, Rav Moshe. Rav Shimon Zalman in Hilchos Shlema, a little bit of a different nusach. Rav Shimon Zalman says another reason why a person is not mechuyev to arrange such a pipe for Yom Kippur. Says Rav Shimon Zalman, it's true. This Yochid who comes and asks the Rav, and he says to Rav, am I gaining by doing this? Sure, you're gaining. You don't need to do an Issa D'Oraisa of eating on Yom Kippur. Am I mechuyev to do this? Says Rav Shimon Zalman, no. Why? Because if we're going to obligate you to do it, it means all the people who are going to eat on Yom Kippur, who are going to have a heta, are going to be mechuyev to try and arrange this. What's going to happen? Out of the thousands of people in Klal Yisrael who are going to get instructions to arrange such a situation, many, most, almost all will arrange this. There's always going to be a yochid who didn't find the doctor and didn't manage to arrange it. And there's always going to be that yochid who won't want to eat on Yom Kippur because the original instruction of the Rav was that he's mechuyev to go and arrange for himself a tube to avoid eating on Yom Kippur straight through his mouth. Says Rav Shimon Zalman, that one yid who didn't fully understand the psak he was given is going to come lidei sakonu. That's enough of a reason that we cannot obligate people to arrange a pipe in order that they should rather rely on Reb Chaim Oizo, who says that there's no Issa D'Oraisa in doing this, rather than actually eating on Yom Kippur. So far, everything is wonderful. Let us move on, Meir Rabbi Say. The Gemara says that there's 5 Inuyim on Yom Kippur. And the Machlokes Rishonim, Ran, Ramban, Gedolei Rishonim, this list is a D'Oraisic list. The Menatayr is also on Yom Kippur, Chila, and Shtia, Nilas, Sandal, Tashmish Amita, Sicha, everything is all a D'Oraisa. Or perhaps not. Even though the Gemara learns it from Psukim, it's all only Asmachtas. But really only Achila and Shtia is a D'Oraisa. Everything else, Sicha, Rechitza, Tashmish, is all only Drabanon. Machlokes Rishonim. The Ran brings a Rai. Gemara says a person's hands got dirty on Yom Kippur, he's allowed to go and wash them. Hands are dirty. Says the Ran, if this would be an Issa D'Oraisa of Rechitza on Yom Kippur, then how can it be matter in Issa D'Oraisa because he got his hands dirty? Elamai, the whole Issa of Rechitza is only a drop. That's the Ran. Says the Tosfos Yeshanim, beginning of the 8th perek of Yuma, La'olam, like Achila is a D'Oraisa, and Shtia is a D'Oraisa, Rechitza is a D'Oraisa. Aber, although Rechitza is a D'Oraisa, only Rechitza's kol gufoy is a D'Oraisa, says the Tosfos Yeshanim. The Gemara doesn't say that a person who got himself dirty from head to toe is allowed to wash on Yom Kippur. Perhaps he's not allowed to. The Gemara says your hands got dirty. Even if Rechitza is a D'Oraisa, says the Tosfos Yeshanim. But anything less than kol gufoy is only a drabanon. If it's only a drabanon, so the Chachamim allowed it, but what can where your hands got dirty? That's the Tosfos Yeshanim. Frek the Oir Godel on the Mishnayos, the Minsker Godel doesn't understand Tosfos Yeshanim. If you hold that mid'oraisa, there is an Issa of Rechitza, when he does a Rechitza of kol gufoy, imke, less than kol gufoy, even if there's not going to be a chorus, but there should be an Issa D'Oraisa of Chatzi Shia. Just like when the Torah says there's a chorus if you ate a Kisevus on Yom Kippur. And there's an Issa D'Oraisa of eating a Chatzi Shia on Yom Kippur. So there should be an Issa D'Oraisa of Rechitzas, hands on Yom Kippur, should be Chayev, should be also Mishum Chatzi Shia. And if it's also Mishum Chatzi Shia, how can the Chachamim allow a person whose hands got dirty to wash his hands on Yom Kippur? That's the kasha of the Iron Gadol. On the Tosis Shonim's opinion, if you hold that Rechitz is also deraisa, but only Kol Gufoy, but then less than Kol Gufoy ought to be Asa, Mishum Chatzi Shia, as a frek the Iron Gadol. And for the Divrei Cheskel and Simtes Vov. And the same thing in the Emek Brocha and Hilchos Yom Kippur. No. B'chol HaTorah Kula, there's an Issa of Chatzi Shia. But not in Rechitzas, Miktsas Kufoy on Yom Kippur. Why? Says Divrei Cheskel and Emek Brocha, Mam Mashnei Nevi'im Misnabim B'Signun Echad. They both say the same Yisoy. If the din of the Torah would be that the Torah says Loi Tirchatz on Yom Kippur, so then there'd be an Issa of a Chatzi Shia. But says the Divrei Cheskel, Torah doesn't say this. What does the Torah say? Afflict yourself. According to the opinion of the Tosis Yishonim, a person takes a bath, a person has a shower, and he's covered in water from top to toe. That makes a Yisuvidaita. And if it makes a Yisuvidaita, it's included in the Issa of the Torah B'Nisim as Nafshik says. Says the Divrei Cheskel, if you washed half your body, you didn't make any Yisuvidaita. There's no Yisuvidaita in washing half your body. It says not Shaykh and Issa of Chatzish. Ad kan Divrei Cheskel. We have to add. The Gemara says, the Torah says if you eat a kazayas of nevela, a kazayas of chaza, you're chayev malchus. Less than a chatzi, than a shir, less than a kazayas, a chatzi shir, is awesome in a Torah because chazi le'tztarufe. What does the Gemara mean, chazi le'tztarufe? Simple. It means practically. Because if you eat a half of shir now, and if you will decide to eat another half of the kazayas of nevela, then you will have been over and it's a terais. Because it's chazir tarufa, that is the sibba why it's asa to eat pachas mikashim. If that's the pshat, then we don't understand the Divrei Cheskel. If the sibba is because it's chazir tarufa, say I washed half my body, it's chazir tarufa, the other half of the body, and then I'll done an terais. Teretz says Divrei Cheskel understands that chazir tarufa is not the sibba why it's forbidden. The Gemara means as follows. If the Torah says don't eat a whole kazayas of nevela, that kazayas is made up of little bits of pachas mikashim. If each part of the kazayas is possible to be part of the big shir which the Torah asked, that is a siman that the Torah forbade even pachas mikashim. Says the Divrei Cheskel, if chazir terufa is not a sibba but a siman, it's only going to be a siman when the Torah says don't eat, and the Torah made a kazayas, made a shir. So each particle is part of that issa of a kazayas. Masha'inkin says the Torah says there's a yisuvidaita of taking a shower, of washing your whole body. So you can't tell me each part of the body must be asa because it's part of the whole. The whole is only asa, not because it's made up of individual parts, but because when you washed your whole body, then you have created a yisuvidaita. That's the shtickle Torah of the Divrei Cheskel. Kamovan, this is a big tema here. Mein alter Rav Zechreinu Livracha, Birchas Yom Tov, the gates of the Rav Rutzal Rakov, asks, he doesn't understand. The whole sugya of Chatzi Shir in the Gemara is talking about Yom Kippur. The fellow eats half of a kesevus on Yom Kippur, has done an issa deraisa of Chatzi Shir. And the issa of eating a kesevus is for the same yisuvidaita. So it's mufresh in the Gemara that a half a kazayis of a half a kesevus is yes chayav on Yom Kippur, a half of a yisuvidaita. So how can the Divrei Cheskel tell me that a half of a rechitza of kol gufoy is not over on yisuvidaita, not over on v'nisim zafshesich? The embassy is that on the Emek Brocha it's a bigger kasha. The Divrei Cheskel himself you see in his Lashon that he himself already made the Nakuda, and he said that a half of a Yisuvidaita of eating does something for a person, and a half of a Yisuvidaita of washing doesn't do anything for a person. It's like Chiddush. There is from Chaim Moiser a different nusach over here. The Gemara learns Chatzi Shia from two Mekoros. One, the Gemara starts off Chazelit Starufa, and then the Gemara brings a pasuk, because the pasuk says by Chelev Lo Yisechel Kol Chelev l'Rabos Pachos Mikashir. The Rishonim ask, why do you need a svara and a pasuk? So Tosfos says, if you didn't have the svara of Chazelit Starufa, you would never dash in the pasuk of Kol Chelev l'Rabos. The Ran says we would have dashed in the pasuk of Kol Chelev l'Rabos, but we would have said it's a pasuk only by Chelev. How do I know to learn that there's a pasuk applies to all our Yisurim? From the svara of Chazelit Starufa. But Chaim Moiser says in Achieza a different matter. And Achanama says Chaim Moiser. He agrees to the Divrei Chesed. In Kol HaTorah Kula, the Shayach, a svara of Chazelit Starufa. And Chazelit Starufa is a reason to asa Pachos Mikashia of Nevela and Pachos Mikashia of Chometz and Pachos Mikashia of Chaza. Why did the pasuk Gemara need a new pasuk of Kol Chelev? Says Rabbi Chaim Moiser, the whole Shikol Torah of the Divrei Chesed. It's not Shayach a Chazelit Starufa on a Chatzi Shia of a Yisuvei Daita. That's why you need a new pasuk of Kol Chelev to tell you that even on Yom Kippur, where the svara of Chazelit Starufa being a simon doesn't apply, there's still an issa of Chatzi Shia on Yom Kippur. But it's the Loika Divrei Chesed who says that by Yom Kippur, by Rechitza, there's no issa of Chatzi Shia. Evidently, Divrei Chesed understood like the Rishonim, that Kol Chelev isn't marbe more than the svara of Chazelit Starufa. I want to go back to the Divrei Chesed. The Divrei Chesed learns that there's no Chatzi Shia in Yisuvei Daita. If I had washed half my body and the other half of the body, I would have done an Issa Deraisa. Says Divrei Chesed, no. But the simon of Chazelit Starufa doesn't apply. Where did he get it from? That Chazelit Starufa isn't dependent on a practical thing, that if you ate the two halves of a kazais, then you're going to be lemaisa oiver. But Chazelit Starufa means that it's a simon that each part of the Torah has. He got it from a Ram. A wunderlich Ram in Shavuos in Daf Tesam Adal. The Ram brings Machlokes Rishonim. What we're going to learn now, Shitz Ram. The Gemara says whenever the Torah forbids something, the Shia is a kazai. And because of Chazelit Starufa, there's deraisa. There's no malchus, but there's deraisa on a half a kazai. Says the Ram, a fellow made a shavua. Shavua that I will not eat a kazayis of this kosher bread or meat. What did he undertake, this fellow? I will not eat a kazayis of this bread. Says the Ram, there's no issa of Chatzi Shia for him to eat half that piece of bread. Why? Because his shavua was on a unit of a kazayis of a piece of bread. Less than that, he never made a shavua. What's the shavua? Torah says, what was your devora that you won't eat a kazayis? Less than a kazayis, you can go and eat mutalachat. If you eat a half a kazayis and then you eat another half of kazayis, you've done an issa deraisa. Chazelit Starufa. So what do you see in the Rand's opinion? Chazelit Starufa is only a simon that when the Torah says don't eat a kazayis of chometz, don't eat a kazayis of nevela, and that kazayis is made of all little bits. So the Torah forbade every part of that kazayis. But when I undertook lo yachel devora not to eat a kazayis, then the Holy says only on a kazayis. The same thing says the Divrei Chesed. Even when the Torah forbids something, but if the Torah forbids it because of Yisuvei Daita, then the Issa of the Torah will only be on the Shia of Yisuvei Daita, less than Rechitzas Kol Gufay. won't have an issa of chazerit terufe to be chayav on Yom Kippur. Ad can the divrei Cheskel and the Ran. Now, Moav Rabbi say, now comes the bombshell. Now comes the chiddush. A chiddush nifla moed, Moav Rabbi. Unfortunately, there are people who need to eat on Yom Kippur. Almost all those people who need to eat Nebuch on Yom Kippur, Rahman al-Islam, but we don't tell them, go and eat a whole kesevus in 2 minutes and be oivan the chiv chorus of the time. We want to be mamayit, we see. Ma'achilin oisai, hakal. Minimize the amount of issa. So what do we tell the fellow? Take a tiny little bit of food that you need to eat on Yom Kippur. Eat it. It's pachos mekashir. You're doing this at the rice of pachos mekashir. But at least you're not doing a chiv of chorus. Wait 9 minutes. That's the longest shir we have of Kedei Achilas. Eat a little bit more. So you ate once pachos mekashir, and you ate another time pachos mekashir, until you eat as much as the doctor demands that you eat on Kippur. What's the effect? He ate what we call shi'urim on Yom Kippur, meaning each time he ate less than a shir. So he managed to keep himself alive. He was over on the issa of chatzi shir, but at least he wasn't over on a chiv chorus on Yom Kippur. This is something happening all the way around the world. For all these people, there's a wunderliche plan, an incredible idea. Some people say in the name of Yisrael Salanta from Vilna. Others say in the name of the Chemdas Shloima. Chemdas Shloima was earlier in the days of Rebbe Vega, Nachasam Seifer. He was nifted between the two of them. He was the Rav of Vasha, Shazam Lifshit. Zok the Chemdas Shloima. Moiridika plan. And he's built on the ram that we just learned, plus a Gemara in Makkos. The Gemara says in Makkos, according to Reb Shimon, we have a rule, ein issa halal is. So therefore, if there's a piece of nevela, which I'm not allowed to eat today and tomorrow, and I'm never allowed to eat it, and then Yom Kippur comes, 6 o'clock in the evening, comes Yom Kippur. All the food in my house becomes forbidden because it's Yom Kippur. Says Reb Shimon, but the piece of nevela is also already before Yom Kippur. Ein issa halal issa. The issa of Yom Kippur is not going to be chal on the issa of nevela. Says Reb Shimon, you eat on Yom Kippur this piece of nevela, you get malchus mishum nevela, but no malchus of Yom Kippur. Why? Ein issa halal issa. That's Reb Shimon in the Gemara in Mecca. Zok the Chemdas Shloima, an unbelievable plan. You have a Yid who comes to the Rav with a letter from the doctor. This is the amount he needs to eat on Yom Kippur. So the Rav says, I'm very sorry, what should I do? You have to eat pachas mekashir. There's no heter to wear on koros on Yom Kippur. But unfortunately, we have to allow you to eat an issa deraisa, pachas mekashir on Yom Kippur. Says the Chemdas Shloima, no need for that. Get up on Erev Yom Kippur on 4 o'clock in the afternoon and make a shvua and say, all this kosher food in my house, I make a neder that from a minute before Yom Kippur till after Yom Kippur, I will not eat a kazayas of any of that food. What happens when you say that? You get an issa deraisa to eat a kazayas of that food. Says the Ran, but less than a kazayas is mutter lechatchila. Because there's no issa of chatzi shir when you made a shvur not to eat a kazayas. Now comes Yom Kippur. 6 o'clock, clock chimes, becomes Yom Kippur. Says Reb Shimon in the Gemara in Makkos, ein issa chal al issa, and Yom Kippur won't be chal on my issa of shvur. Yom Kippur incorporates an issa of chatzi shir, and my shvur does not incorporate an issa of chatzi shir. That's not called an issa moisif. That's not called an issa koilel. and Yom Kippur will not be chal on the food in my house. Says the Chemdas Shloima, in this way, the Rav will tell this fellow to eat pachas mikashia on Yom Kippur, and he hasn't done any issa whatsoever according to the Ram, because Yom Kippur wasn't chal, and the shvua according to the Ram only precludes eating a kazayas, less than a kazayas, no issa. A moiridic plan of the Chemdas Shloima, a go'inus, and not only a go'inish plan, but there's a mokum to say, maybe, according to the Chemdas Shloima, I should have a chiyuv, an obligation, to make such a shvur before Yom Kippur. In the case of putting in the pipe, which is a whole procedure, and you need a doctor, says Ramosha, you're not mechuyev to do this before Yom Kippur. Says Rav Shibas Alman, can't expect everybody in the world to be able to do this. But if the Chemdas Shloima is right, and it's a plan, and all you need to say is a lashon of a shvur, and then go ahead and eat pachas mikashir Yom Kippur. I don't know, even according to Ramosha, there might be an obligation to do this according to the Chemdas Shloima. That's food for thought. Now comes the next thing. Meir HaRav, if we had time, we should be ma'ayin more in the Heilige Werte of the Chemdas Shloima. I want to go a step further, Rabbi say. There's the odd yochid in this world who, unfortunately, Nachman al-Islam, he's so sick that he needs to eat on Yom Kippur, not just pachas mikashir, and not just with 9-minute intervals, but the doctor says he needs to eat like normal. A whole kesevas, in one go, in 2 minutes, he's eating a kesevas. Otherwise, he'll die. Never. So for him, it's pikuach nefesh. And we have no choice. We have to tell him to eat on Yom Kippur with a chiyuv of karas, which is mutter for him because of pikuach nefesh. This situation, the Chemdas Shloima doesn't discuss. But maybe we should discuss it. Maybe according to the Chemdas Shloima, we can still minimize his issa. Because when the doctor and the Rav tell him to eat a whole kazayas on Yom Kippur, means we'll be matir for him, a chiyuv karas. Perhaps it will be better for him. Make a shvur that you won't eat a kesevas of food on Yom Kippur. And on Yom Kippur, you're going to have to be over on your shvur. You'll be over on Lo Yachal Devara. But if Lo Yachal Devara is chal, and ein is a chalal is, and because of that, Yom Kippur won't be chal, then at least we've wriggled this fellow out of the issa de'iraisa of karas of Yom Kippur and replaced it with an issa of a shvur on Yom Kippur. This is going to be Torah on 2 major discussions in the Gedolei Achronim. We haven't got time for all the discussions. 2 of them, which is very important, which we haven't got time for. We'll mention just the Parashas Drachim. The Parashas Drachim brings a Gemara in Yuma, which we're very familiar with. Should always choose the smaller issa. Fellow has to, but he should choose a smaller issa. Until the king of Sefer did the rice. We can't be matter more than the minimum that we need to be matter. So the Gemara has a shaila. Fellow has 1 piece of tevel, grew in Eretz Yisrael, and hasn't had anything separated from it. He can eat this, save his life. Or he can eat truma. What's better? Tevel and don't eat truma, or eat truma and avoid the tevel? That's the shaila in the Gemara. Fret the Parashas Drachim, the Mishnah Lamelech in his Sefer Parashas Drachim. I have an answer for you. I can rig it out of both. You have a kazayas of tevel. Now, why don't you take truma and maisa and eat the rest? The answer is, this fellow is so sick, he needs to eat everything, all the food here. As soon as you separate truma and maisa, the amount that remains will be less than a kashir, and you won't save his life. Frek the Precious Drachim, I've got a gewaltige plan for you. Separate the Trumas and the Meisters. So you've avoided the Issa of Tevel. Take the Trumas and Meisters, throw them back in, mix them up. So now it's all going to be bottled, mixed up, it's come bottled. So when you go and eat something, you're eating something which is a taruvas which you're allowed to eat. What's the whole problem? I did an Aveira of Mevaklin Issa Lachatchila. Nish gefallig. It's better, says the Precious Drachim, to create an Aveira of Mevaklin Issa Lachatchila than to be over the big Aveiras of Truma and Tevel. Says the Precious Drachim, Mikan is a raya that no, this fellow's danger necessitates eating. So whatever he eats, he's allowed to eat. He can eat Tevel, he can eat Truma. But Pikuach Nefesh doesn't allow me to do a separate Aveira, even if by virtue of doing that Aveira, I'm saving myself doing big Aveiras because of Pikuach Nefesh. Says the Precious Drachim, Pikuach Nefesh allows you to eat Tevel or Truma. What are you doing a business deal for the Rebbeinu Shalom? I'll do an Aveira, I'll save the Rebbeinu Shalom that I won't eat Tevel or Truma. No heter for that. Only what the Pikuach Nefesh allow. According to the Precious Drachim, this fellow here has a heter to eat on Yom Kippur. There's no heter to make a shvur which you know you're going to be over. Why do you want to do this? Because in this way, I will orchestrate that the Rebbeinu will be happy. I'm going to be over on Ison shvur of Le'ach Devorah, rather than eating on Yom Kippur, which is Mutzim Shipukach Nefesh. There's no heter to make such a shvur in the first place, L'choira, according to the Precious Drachim. There's a lot more to discuss on this nidden of the Chemdet Shleima. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Rebbeinu should bench us to be zeicha, each and every one of us. If, and I'm sure there are many of you who have oras and kashas on what I've said in the Shia, I beg of you, al tim natov mi bailo. I like hearing oras. I like hearing people who disagree. I like hearing asagas. Let us be zeicha together. Please send to me your oras. We should be zeicha to be falpul together and be zeicha each and every one of us to aksiva v'chasima tovim.